So good afternoon to everybody joining us at home. We're just going to leave it a minute or two while everybody finds their joining links and joins us, and then we will get going with this afternoon's webinar. So if you just bear with us for a minute. Right, while everybody's joining, I will just very quickly run through the house rules, which I'm pretty sure most of you already know, like clockwork. But we can't hear or see you at home, as you're probably aware by now. However, you should be able to see all of our panels today. The session is being recorded and will be available on the Invest Liverpool website, as well as social channels from tomorrow. So if you do have to leave us early for any reason, you can catch up there or send it along to any colleagues. There is a chat and a Q&A function, which again, you're probably all well aware of. Please feel free to use them throughout the session, and our panelists will answer them as and when they can. And yeah, please do use them to their full advantage. Before we get going today as well, I'd just like to, on behalf of the whole Liverpool Mipim team, say thank you to all of our partners for helping us deliver the programme, a very different programme this year. And Stephen, in a second, will explain a little bit more about that and pass on his thanks as well. But the partners that you can see on screen now are our partners for this very different year. So yeah, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Stephen, who is the chair of the Liverpool Mipim steering group.
Thanks, Stefan, and as ever, thank you and the rest of the team for helping to put on this webinar today. I mean, as you say, the Mipim partnership is a little bit different this year. We're usually, 12 months, April to March, but whilst we're probably not looking at a physical Mipim in Cannes until maybe June 21, this hasn't stopped us putting on a whole series of webinars throughout the last few months, and with this one being the very latest. So, I mean, as you say, thanks to the partners that are listed on screen there, we've moved into our October to March program now, and we're hoping that this will include some physical events for our partners, including smaller captains tables to explore some key topics with leaders across the city region from both a public and private sector perspective. So we're ongoing planning with those. It's plainly still difficult whilst we're in national lockdown restrictions, but hopefully we do come out of that pretty soon. And I'll just do my quick plug before anybody else does in terms of hashtag Let's Get Tested. And I think really important that as a business community we get behind the mass testing program that's going on in the city at the moment. So, as I say, thank you to all of the partners who've already signed up and who are up on the screen there. If you haven't yet signed up and want to, there's still time, but believe me, the clock is ticking, because we'll be into our program and you're probably going to miss out on some excellent opportunities to engage in the conversation in some of the events that we've got planned coming up. Today's event is one that I'm particularly looking forward to. It's certainly close to my heart, powered by knowledge and fueled by culture, as we start to explore the region's investment proposition. And for me, this is not just from an investor developer perspective, but also looking at how we attract new occupiers and help existing occupiers to grow in the city region. 4 key words for me that really stand out in terms of how we can achieve that growth, and that is innovation, collaboration, culture, and leadership. And in my mind, we've got bucket loads of that in the city region. And today it's actually personified in the panel that we've got for you. So with no further ado from me, Alex, I think take it away, and really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and welcome everyone to this panel discussion about inward investment to the Liverpool City region. I'm Alex Irwin-Hunt. I'm a global markets editor at FDI Intelligence, which is a specialist publication at the Financial Times focused on foreign investment and economic development. So over the next 50 minutes or so, I'm very glad to be joined by a set of leaders and decision makers from across the Liverpool City region. And we'll be discussing the city's approach to some of the challenges posed by the global pandemic, the major development projects underway and planned in the near future, and how the region is leveraging its knowledge and cultural strengths to boost its proposition to investors. So firstly, it's with great pleasure that we are joined by Steve Rotheram, the Metro Mayor of Liverpool City Region, who many of you will know has championed and supported the development of Liverpool since being elected in 2017. Secondly, we have Jennifer Lee, who heads up consultancy KPMG in Liverpool, where she advises companies across the city region and has her finger on the pulse of the mood amongst investors looking to Liverpool as a destination. Thirdly, we have Colin Sinclair, who is the CEO of Sciontec, the development company that is overseeing regeneration projects and major projects, regeneration programs and major projects across the city, including the £2 billion Knowledge Quarter and Paddington Village development. And last but certainly not least is Claire McColgan, who is the director of Culture Liverpool, where she's played a pivotal role in promoting the city region's cultural sector and was heavily involved in Liverpool's successful bid as the capital of culture a few years ago. Thank you very much, all of you, for taking time to join this discussion. So before we jump into things, I think it's worth setting the scene. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development has forecast a 30 to 40% decline in foreign direct investment flows this year, making the market for attracting inward investment even more competitive than it was pre-pandemic. At FDI Intelligence, we've also been tracking foreign investor sentiment with our FDI index. And the most recent one we published, which was in September, shows that foreign investor sentiment is down by 26% compared with the year earlier. And we're seeing investors become increasingly inward looking and having appetite for safe haven destinations. So given this backdrop, it has been never more important for city regions such as Liverpool to leverage its existing strengths and differentiate itself from peers when attracting and retaining investment, jobs, and the livelihoods that rely upon this. So Steve, as a start, I'd like to come to you. I mean, the Liverpool City region has definitely been making a lot of headlines in terms of the way it has dealt with the pandemic, and certainly is leading the way in the first mass testing pilot in the UK. I want to ask you, what message do you think this city's response is sending to investors?
Thanks very much, Alex, and also to Stephen and Stefan, and another derivation of that name, Steve. I think what it does demonstrate is a growing maturity in the Liverpool City region. Don't forget, we haven't got the same history as like Greater Manchester, who have been working together for decades. We are quite embryonic in our devolution, but it means that you've got 5 boroughs that coalesce around a famous city, and the brand Liverpool is still an enormous advantage to us all throughout the whole of the city region. But of course, on an international and a global stage, it's still one of the most attractive out there. So we have pulled together, representing 1.6 million people across the city region. And what you've seen over the last 7 or 8 weeks with what happened in regard to our response to the imposition of Tier 3 was a new way of doing things. We were told we were going into Tier 3, no ifs, no buts, and we could have kicked back at that, but we knew as leaders across the city region that we needed to do something. We want our city region to come out of Tier 3 as soon as possible. And so we've looked at ways in which we work with central government around innovation, and I'm sure we'll be talking about ways in which we can capitalise as a city region on innovation. But one of those was to hold the first mass testing pilot in the country, possibly in Europe, and that will help us determine not only where infections are arising, but the spread and how it spreads across the demographic, which is equally as important, and of course, how we can take the pressure off our NHS. But all of that is really a backdrop to what we need to do. Basically, we need to wrestle more control of everything from central government, and we are still the most politically centralised democracy in the OECD, and we have the most unbalanced economy in the whole of Europe. So we want to be able to do more of this type of thing to be able to reshape our own destinies. And that means that we have to look beyond the immediacy of the pandemic, and we've started to do that. We're looking at what recovery will look like, what our assets are, and looking at them with a genuine criticality about what we are best at, and not just claiming that we're great at everything, which in some ways, we can look to the past and perhaps there's some truth in that. We want to look at those competitive fields. We are a modern, thriving, dynamic, diverse 21st century destination of choice, and Claire McColgan will tell you about how the visitor economy is so vital to the whole city region, is a driver of economic growth. But people shouldn't forget that we were the fastest growing city region in the whole country pre-pandemic. We had started to see real falls in unemployment. Of course, like most areas, we've seen universal credit and benefit claims starting to rise again. But our advantages, our strengths in infectious diseases, in high performance computing, in advanced manufacturing, they'd started to lead to a genuine renaissance in our top line economic performance. And we were looking forward to what we could do to deliver on a pipeline of game-changing, transformational, shovel-ready projects. And of course, all that came to an abrupt end. But looking at what will happen in the next few months, the government are talking to us now about bringing forward capital investment and to see whether we can deliver on some of those projects before CSR even. And we're quite excited about that. We only yesterday spoke to the Irish government, and the Irish government, along with Greater Manchester and ourselves, they're looking at a trade mission next year, and we'll be looking to see whether we can start to reverse the decline that we've seen in FDI, for instance, and certainly in the Liverpool City region. We need to do more about that anyway. So we brought our institutions together with the growth platform, a single point of contact, one front door for businesses. And tomorrow, I'm going to be speaking to global investors with DIT and two other areas in the UK. But the Liverpool City region, again, has been chosen and pushed front and centre because government can see the way in which we now work in partnership. So I think despite the terrible problems that we have with the pandemic and the public health crisis and all the horrible things that we see about illness and death, when hopefully the vaccine kicks in and we start to return to some sort of normality, I think we'll be able to hit the ground running. And that's why recovery is so important to us all. Thanks a lot.
Perfect overview, and thank you so much for discussing at such length, Steve. And certainly that mature is a word that really stood out to me there. I mean, this is the renaissance of the Liverpool City region. I'd like to come to you next, Jennifer. I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse in terms of what investing companies might be looking for when prospecting Liverpool as a potential destination for investment. I mean, how do you feel recent developments have added or affected the Liverpool brand and appeal to foreign investors?
Thanks, Alex. Well, Liverpool is a fantastic place to invest, and everything we've done of late as a city region helps to showcase us on a global scale. We've showed our strengths as a city, and that will not have gone unnoticed to global investors. You asked what I've been hearing from clients, Alex, and a number of my clients are multinational companies who've already invested locally, and we're still seeing a lot of interest in the UK and the Liverpool City region as a place to invest, particularly from US investors. Brand Liverpool is really strong. So although when considering the UK, London is a huge magnet for global investment, and in our experience, Brexit hasn't changed that position, we should continue to use their strength to enhance our proposition. So when we're looking for inward investment, we should look to see which businesses are already investing in London or elsewhere in the UK and encourage them to grow further in the north and obviously specifically in the Liverpool City region. We should make a virtue out of those links with London. You know, we've both got a rich cultural heritage. We've both got a School of Tropical Medicine, although I do believe ours may have been first. And we need to show how some of their strengths are also our strengths. And we should use this for leverage and then really drill down into our uniqueness. And then once an investor is interested in the Liverpool City region, the key questions that I often hear are really quite granular. So they ask, you know, what's the access to the market like? If I invest in the city region, where are my clients? Who are my suppliers? How do I meet them? What's the business environment like? What are the costs of operating? What space is available? What's the talent like in the city region and the surrounding areas? Is there a good standard of living? You know, and as a professional advisor to global businesses, we're right in the middle of this inbound debate. So I think the private sector and the public sector, you know, really should work well hand in hand, because as our business grows, as the Liverpool City region grows, and Liverpool City region's got one of the strongest professional business services communities to really support those future investors. The sector plays an important role in enabling the city region's growth and supporting and encouraging investment. I'm a board member of the Professional and Businesses Services Sub-Board for the LEP, and we're all really keen to help push consistent messaging for investment purposes. The recently compiled brand toolkit is an excellent start, and it now needs the help of the private sector to strengthen the brand narrative through case studies and examples, so that we're all using that content really consistently. I'm seeing that the deals market is buoyant at the moment, lots of interest from inward investment, and we're always happy to talk to any businesses who are looking to invest in Liverpool to really make this work. And, you know, my clients, what they want to hear is what are the key successful things that they need to do to invest in the city region, and then how do we translate the bureaucracy of what needs to happen into a compelling commercial proposition.
Oh, thank you very much for giving us that flavour and what you're seeing from your clients. And certainly, I think all the ingredients are there. We're getting towards this perfect recipe for consistent inward investment and leveraging some of the strengths that the Liverpool City region has. And I think this is a perfect time to segue on to you, Colin. I mean, I know that you spent most of your working life in Manchester, but have since come back to your hometown, Liverpool. As a broad question, I mean, what brought you back? And tell us a little bit about what you're doing in terms of with Sciontec.
Thank you. Well, I grew up in Merseyside, but went to university in Manchester. And, you know, that was a fantastic journey from, you know, running nightclubs and managing bands to inward investment, and latterly helping Bruntwood to diversify from being an office business into, you know, now a leading player in science and technology. But when I got offered the chance to come back to Liverpool as my home city, it was an easy decision, really, because if you look at where we are now as a city in the UK, and picking up on what Steve and Jen have said, we are in the perfect place to see this city grow exponentially. And, you know, if you look at the whole really area, if you want to grow a city and a city region, you've got to have vision, you've got to have strength in the political leadership, you've got to be prepared to work closely with the private sector, and you've got to have the key assets. And with the work that we're doing in Liverpool to upskill our population, to retain our graduates, the research at the universities, and the way I think that the city and city region have responded to the pandemic with the economic recovery plans, and then the city region's submission for the government's CSR, I don't think anybody could see any better opportunity for investment in the UK. You know, people choose where to locate their business based on talent, and Liverpool is full of talent. And what's even more exciting about Liverpool as a region is it's a really strong city when it comes to culture. And there's a phrase that we've talked about recently, that, you know, Liverpool is a place that is powered by knowledge and our knowledge economy, but really fueled by that cultural depth that we have in the city. And you know, it's a story that's often told, but the reason why the Royal College of Physicians picked Liverpool above Manchester and Leeds was not just the world-leading universities, the School of Tropical Medicine, the new hospitals, but because of the culture that they found in this city. I think that's really important, because people want to invest and work in a great place, in a really exciting, vibrant place. So being in Liverpool at the moment, I think, is a pretty easy decision.
I think that's a perfect point to segue on to you, Claire. Of course, you're heading up the development of the cultural sector within Liverpool. I mean, we've heard a little bit about some of the knowledge strengths and the Royal College of Physicians deciding to set up in the Liverpool City region. But what about the cultural sector? I mean, how is the city region leveraging its cultural sector to really differentiate itself in this increasingly competitive market for inward investment?
I think it always has. I think it's quite hard when you put the cultural sector into a box, you know, because it's not. It kind of seeps into everything that we do. It's the way that people tell their stories. It's the way that people tell that, you know, do their lives. It's the visitor economy sector. It's those little bars and restaurants that have grown up on Castle Street and Bowl Street. And what the story of that does is it creates a compelling narrative for a city region. And that is what I think is really exciting about the 10 years that we've got to come, rather than 10 years that we've had past. For the last 10 years, the cultural offer of Liverpool, I think, has been second to none. You know, from the big events that kind of bring millions of people to the city, but give a global image of a city that is open and is beautiful and is welcoming, through to the kind of smaller community events that kind of tell us the day-to-day stories of this city's life. That's fantastic. The next stage is kind of how we take those stories that people tell, combine those with the visitor economy, and combine those and create that next selling 10 years. And I think one of the really interesting things that we've done over the pandemic is start to that whole ecology of where great culture and great arts and great storytelling and great freedoms actually lead is to a really, really strong visitor economy sector. And in some ways in Liverpool, you know, it's 48% of our business rates. That's huge. You know, it's 270 million that comes back into the city council's kind of coffers to look after vulnerable people. That comes from that particular sector. And we've grown that really over the last 12 years. And that's a phenomenal growth. The next 10 years, which is kind of where we're really interested, is when we come back from this, green energy, the way that kind of we deal with different sectors and how we kind of bring them on is really exciting. And the kind of narrative we tell about this city, you know, Steve talked earlier about the test and trace. That was a risk. You know, this city took a massive risk to do a national test and trace system. It was the right thing to do, because what it shows people is that this city will take calculated risks, but it will take risks, and it's ambitious, and it's doing the right things for the people who live here. And I think that kind of whole package sets your store in a really, really interesting way for the way that new generations want to come and move to places. So they don't necessarily want to come and move for a job. They want to come and move for a job and a lifestyle that goes alongside that. And when you kind of put the city centre and this incredibly vibrant, multicultural place together with the beaches, you know, the countryside that kind of, you know, that wraps around the Wirral, you've got an incredible offer for both inward investments, but for places people want to come and raise their families. And I think the way that we move over the next 10 years around that whole agenda, around really pushing a lifestyle choice, will be really exciting in terms of how we attract kind of investors. Just one quick example, we're doing a big, and it's a cultural example, we're doing a big show with Massive Attack as part of Good Business Festival, which is an initiative, you know, instigated by Steve. But this show with Massive Attack will be the first carbon neutral show. It will be here hopefully in July. But from that kind of risk-taking conversation, because it is a risk, because we might not get it all right, we've got a conversation this evening with 15 other promoters from across the world. Now, that's not a nice to have. If those 15 promoters decide to invest in this city, that is hugely valuable in an economic way, but also it's hugely valuable in terms of the people that we want to attract to stay in this city, the graduates that Colin's been talking about, you know, the people we want to move here. This city is, I think, it's one of the most exciting places you could bring up your kids or you could live. But we need to tell the world about that. And the way that we'll tell the world about that is through that kind of validation, if you like, by your Massive Attacks, by your big businesses that are working on the Good Business Festival with us, by those new and young companies that aren't the kind of status quo. you know, that will come to a city because Steve and Joe and the politicians took that risk on something like test and trace, you know, took a risk. And that's exactly, I think, where the city needs to be.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'd like to just remind anyone listening in or, you know, participating in this, please feel free to send some questions over. I'll make sure to make some time at the end. But we've heard some real buzzwords there: maturity. There's the ingredients are coming together for a very consistent investment proposition and taking that risk with the approach to COVID. So I suppose coming back to you, Steve, how are you trying to sort of consolidate all of these ingredients? You've got the knowledge sector, you've got the innovation going on there, you've got the cultural sector that's been consistently strong and continue to show strength. How are you trying to bring that all together as an investment proposition to try and attract more inward investment?
I think in regard to the wider visitor economy, you know, not just the cultural aspect of that, but the sector in its widest form, we're doing okay, you know, but are we fully maximising its opportunities? No. And we were going to do more to exploit that particular sector anyway. In a post-pandemic world, in a post-Brexit world, we're already looking at what that might mean and reshaping our thoughts around what we can do to encourage, of course, more visitors. We want people to come here because not only do we want people to enjoy their time in, primarily it's Liverpool city centre, isn't it? But, you know, going out to hopefully the wider city region and seeing some of those assets that Claire spoke about. But it changes people's perceptions of us, and we need to do a little bit more of that. We've got a great international brand, but we still have some work to do within the UK to persuade people that this is the place to invest. So they go hand in hand. So we're using that, if you like, as a conduit to get people interested. But then we can point to projects which do maximise the potential of the fourth industrial revolution, the sort of the knowledge intensive industries. For instance, going outside of Liverpool, because Colin will tell you all about the Liverpool bit, but in the city region, I was speaking to Downing Street last night about the £60 million National Packaging Innovation Centre, which is in the Wirral. It's Unilever, but it's in Port Sunlight. What does it propose to do? Well, Kastner and Kellner set up in Widnes, and one of their products eventually became plastic. I think it's incumbent on us as a new generation to try and put right one of our legacies, which is to look at packaging in a different way. And so working with the National Packaging Innovation Centre, they're going to develop biodegradable packaging. And that then takes us full circle, doesn't it? You know, from, you know, understanding and celebrating our rich history, but also looking to the future, how we can maximise the potential. We've got the hill, which I'm sure Colin will speak about, but how about digital connectivity? There's a place in America called Chattanooga. Chattanooga reinvented itself. That's a model that I've been looking at for the last 5 years. I'm quite friends with the mayor there. And what they did is had that vision. It was spoken about that you need that vision. So clarity of vision is something that all of the leaders now have all bought into in the 6 districts of the city region. And we're going to exploit again the assets that we've got. So we have Sciontec in Daresbury, which houses the Hartree supercomputer, the most powerful computer and most sophisticated computer in the whole of the country. It's got a sister down south, but forget about that. We've got the best one. And in Southport, at the other end of the city region, the 2 fibre optic transatlantic cables land, which connects the UK with America, North America. And we are going to join those 2 assets up, which provides us with a digital ring 600 kilometres and a backhaul network, which means that we can get ultra fast speeds, not super fast, ultra fast speeds, and provides us with the capacity for big data analytics. So that is literally thinking about the 4th industrial revolution and our history as part of the first industrial revolution, and bringing those two things together, celebrating our past, but looking at where we can look to the future of what's going to happen in the world of work. And we'll be looking for investment opportunities with partners for that particular project. And there's lots of others, modern methods of construction. We're also looking at a £190 million project there. But we really do want to celebrate all the great things that we're famous for. But we want to also look to the future, and we want people to be thinking, where is that place to be? Where's that place to grow our business? Where's that place to invest? It is the Liverpool City region.
So I think they're two very good examples. I mean, you talk about the innovation within packaging. That sort of resonates with environmental, social, and governance principles, which is very much at the front of mind for investors. And then on top of that, you know, the connectivity that will be enabled by that transatlantic cable, as you say, the fourth industrial revolution, is crucial at the moment. You're seeing re-evaluation of supply chains across the globe, and global value chains being rethought in terms of where companies want to set up. So I think this also comes, is a perfect way to segue to you again, Jennifer. I mean, this sort of vision, this forward-looking focus, I mean, are you seeing some clients picking up on this and seeing opportunities in the Liverpool City region as a result of the vision we're seeing from Steve and other leaders across government?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As Steve mentioned, you know, our brand Liverpool is, you know, very strong, and that's because of the strength of our culture and knowledge proposition. So we've got a great starting position, but we need to make sure that that brand narrative is supported by concrete facts, so that there's a real commercial proposition to invest in the city region, and so that we're not looking backwards. You know, we are looking forward to all the great things that are going to happen. And, you know, I would say this as an accountant, but you've really got to get into the numbers and the granular detail as well. You know, make the numbers stand out, so there's real substance to all of our, you know, great marketing claims, if you like, as a city. And the businesses that we want to attract will be supported by some of the best advisors in the world, and we shouldn't overplay our strengths. I think, you know, Steve, you mentioned earlier, we can't possibly be the best in the world at everything. So we should know our strengths and really focus on these. You know, big investors can go to any city, so they want to know where they're going to get a good return, where the process is the most straightforward. We really need to make it easy for them to, you know, to see what our future vision is, and for them to invest in that. So no matter what's happening politically, the Liverpool City region, you know, must present itself as a cohesive unit. You know, exactly as Steve has been doing, we need you to be, you know, telling potential investors that we make things happen here in Liverpool, and we've got, you know, a figurehead for investment, and that one front door approach again that you mentioned earlier, Steve, that really makes a difference. So for me, what clients say is, you know, it's about having a vision, having a strategy, but then having the support and evidence as to how we're going to make that work, and then making ease of investment absolutely crucial. So, you know, when you look at the likes of sovereign wealth funds who are making real estate investments, they don't like to take development risks. So how can we help to de-risk such investments? The US mindset, for example, is quite process driven. So it's really useful for US investors to have something which sets out the processes for investing in Liverpool. You know, how does it work from pre-decision assessment through to getting boots on the ground? What are the regional government and other partners going to do to make it easy for people to invest? How long is it going to take? What incentives are available? You know, what other US companies are already in Liverpool? What's their story? Why have they been successful? And then what do they think of the future of the city? Can they be cheerleaders, you know, for the region? I think we mentioned, you know, before, transport links. You know, Liverpool's the closest, biggest port to the US east coast. And we should also think about our links to Ireland, as Steve mentioned again, you know, trade-wise through the port and airport, and also in light of Brexit, as well as our historical and cultural links. And again, as Steve mentions, our infrastructure plans, but more importantly then, we need to just go granular and say, what opportunities do these present to people, and how is our existing infrastructure strong enough to support that investment now, and what we're looking to attract in the future?
Sure, that's really useful. Thank you for giving us a little bit of an insight into the mindset of different types of investors. And certainly I think that clarity in terms of projects, where can investors make an impact? Where can they make their returns? How can they assess the decisions that to make a long-term commitment to the Liverpool City region? I think, Colin, it's a perfect place to come over to you again. I know that you've been working on several major projects across the city region. It'd be great if you could just give us a bit more detail on that. And specifically, how are you engaging with occupiers? Because any investor that wants to make an investment, they want to know that their buildings are occupied, that their businesses will thrive. So just a bit more information from you, if we can, please, Colin.
Okay. This morning we had the City Region Growth Platform board meeting. It's really listening to what Jen said, because that could have been the perfect introduction to today's discussion, because the focus now of all of our colleagues in the city region is about supporting businesses and growing businesses and making sure that we have the evidence base to attract that new investment. And I think as a city region, we're getting better and better at that. And we're starting to create, through the brand work, through the creation of Growth Platform, through all the really bright, hard-working people in Man Island and at Cunard Building, we're now getting a really good evidence base to attract investment. We also need to protect those businesses that are struggling in the pandemic. That's important. I think that future innovation fund that's been created is probably one of the best schemes anybody can have seen anywhere in the country, and the team that have done that, should rightly think that. I feel very, very proud. It's an awesome scheme, and it's a really great way to help new businesses. But we actually have a lot of businesses that are growing, and businesses in health, life sciences, AI, robotics, creative media, digital, they're all growing through the pandemic. They're seeing opportunity in difficult times. Liverpool Science Park is 100% occupied. All our labs are full, I think for the first time since they were built. I know that Sciontec Daresbury are building another 40, 50,000 square foot. We've now commissioned a study that the city region are leading on to work out exactly what lab space we've got across the city region, in the Knowledge Quarter, at Sciontec Daresbury, at places like the Heath, so we can invest in that space, build more space, because one thing that I'm sure Jen would agree with in terms of inward investment is when people decide to make that move for their fintech company, their lab company, their clinical trials, they expect the space to be there now. That's really important, that we take a risk. We took that risk as we've talked about already on this webinar in terms of doing that brilliant mass testing pilot. We now need to take a risk in bringing forward the science and tech workspace, the office space and the labs of the future. I think that's absolutely critical, because if we've got it, everything else is in place. I had a call this morning with Mike Moran, who, brilliant guy, built Rutherford Cancer Centre in Liverpool. Mike's out in Dubai raising money. We needed some help with him for a bid that's going on in terms of the vaccine trials. And Mike's view is quite simple. Liverpool now has everything in place with the political leadership and the private sector people. What we now need to do is to develop that space. And so we're working with a Hill team that Steve has mentioned, a huge project for integrated health data. We're looking to create the second big new workspace building on Paddington Village called Hemisphere, like two sides of the human brain, the creative and the academic coming together. And that's based on the success that we've had already with the Spine. And we're working with LJMU to create a new building, potentially called Tech Central at Coppers Hill, which would link creative media digital tech companies into their business school. So putting everything that's good in this city about education, science and technology into one place. And I am a big champion for the Knowledge Quarter. I'm chief exec of Knowledge Quarter Liverpool, but I'm also a huge supporter of everything in the city region. And there's a right place for every business. And for some businesses that will be Daresbury, for some that will be Runcorn, for some that will be the Knowledge Quarter. But let's give them that choice of product. And I'm really confident that if we take this moment in time to develop the right buildings, then I think we'll fill them.
Certainly, and I think certainly from the rankings we do of investment locations across the globe in FDI Intelligence, a big sort of buzzword is this plug and play infrastructure. And as you say, companies that might want to move their fintech operations, or whether it's clinical trials, etc., they need that infrastructure ready. And as you just outlined, there is infrastructure ready in Liverpool, and there's been fantastic uptake for it, which is definitely an indicator of success. But clearly a lot happening in the innovation and knowledge space. I'd like to come back to you, Claire, on the cultural side of things. Maybe you can just give us a bit more colour. Are you taking a bit similar approach in the cultural sector? And I know in particular there was an exciting announcement recently in terms of a pop-up film studio in the historic Littlewoods building. So just want to hear a bit more about what's happening in the cultural sector. I think you're on mute, Claire, sorry.
The soundtrack to our pandemic. I think that a couple of things, just to pick up on Colin's plug and play, that's what the film studios are. So, you know, we decided that with the CA on our first recovery, we started working on recovery plan as a city, I think 5 days after the pandemic hit, because we knew about the seismic effect, especially around the kind of visitor economy and cultural economy that this would have. And one of the big ideas was to get kind of 2 pop-up film studios up and ready to go as soon as possible to cope with the demand that we've seen kind of growing as a city. They're planning commission stage now in November. They'll be up and ready to go between April, May this year. And the interest we've had in them has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, we could have built probably 10 of them and we've got huge interest. And what that does, I think, is it kind of tells the whole journey of an idea. So Liverpool has been a brilliant film set for the last 20, 30 years. You know, it's doubled as New York, it's doubled as Russia, it's doubled as, it's been in Harry Potter, it's been in all the kind of big films that you will see on the screen. And they come and they film and they fill our hotels and then they go again. What the film studios does is kind of the child of that story, if you like, and it's about creating work for people. It's about creating kind of training programs, especially for young people in film, but it means you can go from start to finish in one place. And that's really important for us as a city. I think you kind of see that with the cultural sector. I mean, a big, you know, it's been probably one of the sectors, well, all the sectors probably that I'm responsible for are the hardest hit. But cultural sector, especially because lots of it is in buildings. So lots of our cultural sector, whether it's the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic, it's the Everyman, they're all buildings based. And obviously at the moment with COVID, that's quite tricky. But I think the things that we're talking about as a city, and again, it puts us ahead of the pack in terms of, it's certainly in terms of the UK, is how we turn that cultural offer from being inside buildings to being outside and in the fresh air. How do we've had an initiative called Without Walls that's been hugely successful, very simple idea, buying small restaurants and bars, tables and chairs to go outside. It meant that they had a huge result from Eat Out to Help Out, for example, and the economic impact of that has been really significant for the investment that we put in. But again, we moved really quickly on that. We didn't wait. And I think that's what's, for me, it's really exciting about kind of the next 10 years is Liverpool doesn't wait to be kind of given something. You know, we're really good at kind of seeing what the opportunities are and kind of going for them. And I think the next chapter and kind of picking up on Jen's point is how we package that for different sectors and how we package that story for different sectors. So a city that can move really quickly, that can make your investment a reality and your kind of dream as a business a reality within a few weeks is the right place to go. You know, to get rid of the bureaucracy, to get rid of kind of all of that is a good thing to do. And I think that's that'll be really exciting for us over the next 10 years because the pandemic has taught us that it is all right to move quickly and take calculated risks on things, and that big machines like city councils, like authorities, you know, like the kind of government, can, when we want to, work really, really quickly. And I think a different thing that there is here, and there isn't anywhere else actually, is the relationship across sectors. So the relationship between the public and the private sector to make things happen for the good of all. And I think that is a really interesting circle that isn't actually replicated, I don't think, in any other city or region in the country.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very vital point. And actually, we've spoken at a very high level. There's exciting opportunities for investors across the city region. But this combination of the cultural and innovation sectors, I mean, what does that mean in practice for the people of the Liverpool City region? I mean, Steve, I'll come to you on this one. What does it mean in practice, this vision you have for people on the ground?
Well, it's about opportunity, isn't it? I keep on saying to every audience that I speak to, and certainly to many of the departments that I have to deal with in government, that our area has been left behind, not because it doesn't have talent. It's not about talent, it's about opportunity. Believe me, if we get the opportunity, then we'll show people just the plethora and the depth of talent that we have in the city region. But we've been held back, and we've been held back basically because when I was an MP, I saw it with my own eyes, that there was far too much emphasis on what was in the best interests of London and the south and southeast specifically. But there is that, I don't know, London centricity about policy making. With devolution, we're able to move away from that. And whilst you talk about culture, it's really important, and of course exploiting those great opportunities in the future, the knowledge and the other areas that Colin's outlined. It's all part of a package. People don't just move, or people don't just invest in an area for one specific thing. There's a multitude and multi-complexity of overlapping issues that will attract somebody, and that is about lifestyle. So culture is really important to that, but it could be about housing, and so we're looking at our housing offer across the city region. It could be about the public transport system. So we want to develop a London-style integrated public transport system, really fit for the 21st century, with the best trains in the whole country, which we've bought £500,000, with a new fleet of hydrogen-powered buses, with a genuine interlinked cycling and walking network. That's about 600 kilometres as well. So we, you know, the stuff we're doing to reinvent ourselves with energy. I want us to be the UK's renewable energy coast. We've got wind power. We've got Europe's largest offshore wind cluster at Barebow Bank. We've got photovoltaic and solar power. We've got hydrogen, hydrogen capture and storage. The last thing that we have now to exploit is the tide, and we're going to build a Mersey tidal barrier, a project that will be able to generate clean, green, renewable, predictable energy for 100 years and for 1 million people. These are the sort of visionary things that will attract investment. And it's not, as I say, just about whether somebody can get the biggest return in a specific area. I think some of the long-term investment opportunities in the Liverpool City region will be so attractive, given the sort of vicissitudes and the fluctuations that you're getting now with investment opportunities, which give you perhaps a greater initial return, but are much more risky. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to almost hedge to see whether we can get some short-term gains, but also some long-term projects.
Those trailblazing renewable energy projects pay massive dividends. I mean, there's lots of examples across the globe where when you have that sort of infrastructure, when you have the reliable energy, that's an even more attractive prospect for investing companies. I've just seen we've had one Q&A question come in from Peter Commins. Thank you very much, Peter. I'm going to come to Colin on this. He says, I agree with Colin that Liverpool City region has to develop the right buildings available to capitalise on potential investors. But what measures are the city region implementing to have the available funds to develop those buildings? So Colin, I'll come to you first, and maybe Jennifer or Claire might want to add to that.
Okay, so one of the big challenges for Liverpool as a region is funding new development. Our rental levels are not as high, clearly as those in London, but still lag significantly behind Manchester and other cities. So we've got to work doubly hard to build the kind of buildings to attract the new occupiers. And that's a bit of a catch-22. If a city grows exponentially like Manchester did, then its rents go up to £32–40 a square foot, and there's a clear development profit in making those new buildings. And it becomes almost a cyclical process. And we're at the start of that journey, but we've got to crack this cycle in Liverpool of artificially low rents, because without that return, people won't invest. But I think we're getting there. You know, Legal & General bought 25% of the shares in Sciontec with Bruntwood during the pandemic, during the recession. They're one of the biggest funds in the world. And their interest in Liverpool and that investment is because they believe we can make schemes work that they're prepared to invest in, which will attract the occupiers, which get us into that process. And it amazes me that people will shortlist Manchester and pay a 50% premium on the property price when Liverpool, as a city region, is 20–30 miles down the road, has exactly the same graduate talent pool, the same level of airport connectivity, better, much better in cultural and physical environment in terms of that Sefton coast, proximity to North Wales and countryside. I mean, there's so many reasons why a business should choose being in Liverpool City region. And they're not because we haven't got the property. So you asked, the question was, how are the city region dealing with it? Well, we're dealing with it by looking at how we deal with that gap mechanism. And you've got to be very careful with grants, because grants can distort the property market and can actually trap you with that artificially low headline rent ceiling. So we're very lucky that we've got good funders now with people like Legal & General and other funds looking at the city region. And we've got some very bright people in the combined authority looking at how we can deal with that gap funding issue and what mechanisms we can use which will close the gap between the development cost and the headline rent, but still allow us to grow the overall economy. So, you know, we've got to be pretty clever, but I think we've got the people here in the city and the city region that can do it. And I think we've got the mechanisms in place to close that gap.
Thank you, Colin. We've had another question from Jeff Blackford. Maybe this would be good to pose to Jennifer, given that you've got the finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening with investors and what they're looking for. It's saying here, is it clear what type of space is needed? And I presume this is in regard, he follows on to say, are we talking about labs for R&D, office, creative, sort of live work type schemes, or is it all of these all together? What are investors, what kind of space are investors looking for in Liverpool, or what are they interested in investing in and building in Liverpool in terms of space?
I think it's a really interesting question, because I think the pandemic has maybe changed the way in which people are viewing the types of space that they need. But, you know, certainly to echo Colin's point earlier, you know, labs for R&D, you know, people want them, and, you know, you mentioned plug and play. They want them to be set up, and they want a community to be created around those so that they can really embed themselves in what's happening in the city region. Claire mentioned about, you know, the film and the creative industry. Again, we've taken, I guess, a view as to how do we create a community around something from the startup stage. So not just those larger companies and coming in and using our buildings for, you know, for filming and investment when they're already established, but how can we grow our own creative industry from the roots up? So, you know, that type of space is clearly needed. As for office space, I think that's a really difficult question, because I think it was the CBI who released some statistics a week ago that said that companies are looking to grade their space by 18% as a result of the way in which we're working now with technology. So I think there is a definite need for prime space in the city centre and those plug and play options. But for the office space, I think that'll be a bit of a one to watch as the months go on.
Certainly, and I think there's a lot of discussion of this hub and spoke model or hybrid ways of working in companies. Why do you need a huge major office in London? You can have a smaller office in London and set up regional offices in city regions such as Liverpool. So actually, arguably, you could say there is a lot of opportunity in terms of office space as well with the pandemic and spreading investment more broadly across the UK.
Sure.
I see we're coming towards the end of our time. I just want to bring back in Stephen from Avison Young, who wanted to say a few words, but otherwise I'll close up in a moment. But Stephen, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, thanks very much, Alex. What an absolutely fantastic conversation this has been, and it's been brilliant to see, you know, the joined up thinking across all of our contributors. So thanks for the panel, for your input, and to your very insightful moderation as well. Alex, I mean, yeah, I just wanted to say that obviously this is part of our continuing Mipim partnership program. So important for me to again thanks to all of our partners who have already signed up to be a part of the journey with us over the course of the next 5-6 months or so. For those of you who haven't yet signed up, well, I think today is a brilliant example as to why you should, because you've heard about the numerous opportunities that the city region presents from both a public and private sector perspective. So I think if you want to be a part of the journey and to contribute to the forthcoming chapters in the renaissance of Liverpool, then there's no better way to do that than through the unique partnership that we've developed here in Liverpool through the Mipim partnership. So it's been brilliant to be able to bring together the panels that we have done today, and obviously there's plenty of people out there listening. So my final thing I would say is, you know, a recording is available, you know, will be available in the future. If you're feeling a bit down over the coming weeks of the remaining part of lockdown, then get it on, and it'll brighten up your afternoon, I assure you. And send it out to some of your colleagues and to people outside of the region, so that they can hear the fantastic story about what Liverpool can offer as a region and is offering, and to show this, you know, really joined up approach that we've got here in the city. So thanks again to everybody, and thanks to you, Alex, for, as I say, for your expert and insightful moderation today. So that's all from me. Cheers.
It's been my pleasure. I see that we actually have one more question from Rita Hunt, which I think maybe the panelists can follow up, and we can provide some insights into that afterwards. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I think it's an exciting time to be looking at the Liverpool City region and regions outside of London in the UK as attractive destinations for inward investment. Unless anyone has some closing thoughts, it's been a pleasure, and that's from me.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.